asset should be?
Absolutely not. He's just not a fair person. He's very greedy.
Kody Brown's quiet rebellion didn't begin with a camera or a book deal. It started with a whisper she had been taught to suppress since childhood. "It's fine," she would say again and again, even when it wasn't. Those two words became the mask she wore through years of silent frustration, buried anger, and emotional restraint. Behind those words lay disappointment, loneliness, and a life where she put herself last always. But the mask was beginning to crack. As Kody prepares to release her memoir this September, the first glimpses into her writing reveal something deeper than just a tell-all. This isn't about gossip or revenge. This is a story of unlearning, of waking up inside a life that was never hers to begin with. It's a reckoning. A woman staring back at her own reflection and asking, "When did I forget who I was?" She writes, "I realized I've spent years saying it's fine on repeat. It's fine because I'm angry and don't have the words for it. It's fine because it's not worth the effort to explain. It's fine because that's what I've been trained to be. Fine, small, not a bother." These aren't just sentences. These are the breaking of a generational curse. A liberation from silence. A declaration that being fine is no longer enough. Kody's world was shaped by fundamentalist teachings, cultural submission, and a deeply rooted tradition of polygamy. Her bloodline runs through the very heart of the Apostolic United Brethren, one of the most entrenched polygamous sects in the American West. Her father, Rex Alred, was the son of the former prophet Rulon Alred, a man whose name is synonymous with plural marriage. Her mother, Annie, is a LeBaron by birth, another name soaked in fundamentalist history. This isn't just Kody's story. It's the story of generations of women who were trained to stay silent, to say it's fine, while their spirits withered. For decades, Kody played the role she was given: wife, mother, believer, loyal sister wife. And when the cameras came, she smiled. But behind that smile was a woman beginning to question everything she had been taught. A woman wondering whether her love was reciprocated, whether her sacrifices were seen, whether her life was truly her own. She wasn't angry yet, not visibly. But the questions had started, and once they did, they wouldn't stop. She started to see her reflection not as someone content, but someone diminished. She was present but not seen, heard but not listened. 2. She was there, always, for everyone else except herself. And eventually, the pain of staying became greater than the fear of leaving. She looked at old episodes of the show and noticed a distant version of herself, smiling on cue, accommodating others, agreeing to decisions that slowly chipped away at her identity. Viewers may have seen a cooperative wife, but inside, Kody was unraveling. The silence she had inherited, worn like a second skin, began to itch. She started journaling more, thinking critically about her faith, the dynamics of her marriage, and even questioning if the life she had devoted herself to had ever truly served her. She began to recall moments from her childhood that echoed eerily into her adult life, like the way she had been told to stay small, not to make waves, not to question authority. That kind of upbringing doesn't just disappear. It shapes how you move through the world. Kody moved quietly, carefully, always measuring her worth against the expectations of others. And yet, somewhere beneath the weight of it all, her true self never gave up. It waited patiently for the moment she'd finally decide to break free. The writing of this memoir is not just the telling of her story, it's the reclaiming of her voice. With each paragraph, she's untangling herself from years of indoctrination, of toxic submission disguised as piety. She's exposing the emotional toll of being the agreeable one, the peacekeeper, the good wife. This is Kody raw, unfiltered, and unapologetic. And while some might dismiss her journey as a midlife crisis or a public unraveling, they'd be missing the point entirely. This is not about destruction, it's about rebirth. Christine is not burning bridges. She's building new ones, starting with the one that leads back to herself. Christine's story isn't just hers alone, it's inherited. Her roots stretch deep into the soil of Mormon fundamentalism, tangled in generations of expectations, doctrine, and family legacy. To understand her struggle is to understand the weight of that inheritance and how hard it is to walk away from something that has defined your identity since birth. Born into one of the most prominent polygamous bloodlines in the American West, Christine's lineage is inseparable from the history of plural marriage. Her father, Rex Alred, was the son of Rulon Alred, a prophet of the Apostolic United Brethren who was assassinated in the 1970s. Her mother, Annie, came from the LeBaron family, another polygamous dynasty known for its controversial history and extremist offshoots. Christine wasn't just raised in the culture of plural marriage, she was born to uphold it. While other Brown family members, like Robin and Mary, came into polygamy by conversion or late introduction, Christine was immersed in it from the beginning. She was raised to see plural marriage not as an option, but as a divine requirement. Her identity, salvation, and worth were tied to her ability to accept and fulfill the demands of a lifestyle that asked women to sacrifice constantly in the name of eternal reward. As a young girl, Christine learned early how to stay quiet, how to smile even when it hurt, how to be agreeable. These weren't just personality traits, they were survival mechanisms. In her world, being compliant was synonymous with being good. She watched the women in her life carry burdens without complaint, convincing themselves that obedience was strength and martyrdom was virtue. And for a long time, she believed them. She entered her marriage with Kody not just as a young woman in love, but as someone fulfilling her spiritual destiny. She believed in the vision. She believed she was doing what God wanted, even when it was hard, even when she had doubts, even when it meant giving more than she got. Over time, that conviction started to crack. The more she gave, the less she felt seen. The more she sacrificed, the more invisible she became. As Kody's attention shifted and the dynamics within the household grew increasingly unbalanced, Christine was left clinging to the belief that if she just tried harder, loved more deeply, served more selflessly, it would all work out. But the show exposed something she couldn't ignore. The cameras caught what the heart had long suspected. Viewers saw it. Christine saw it. Kody wasn't showing up for her the way she showed up for him. The playing field was not equal, and the love was not mutual. Still, walking away wasn't just a romantic decision. It was a theological one. Leaving Kody meant leaving the blueprint of salvation she'd been handed since birth. It meant challenging the idea that her eternal family was the only path to heaven. It meant confronting the fear that had been drilled into her from childhood, that leaving meant spiritual death. But in the space left behind by fear, something new began to grow clarity, and with that clarity came strength. Christine began to connect with other women who had left. Her own aunt, Kristen Decker, had once made the same brave choice. She saw in them not ruin, but resilience. Not destruction, but healing. And slowly, Christine began to rewrite the narrative she had been given. She wasn't damned, she was waking up. And with each step away from the life she had been born into, she moved closer to the life she was meant to create for herself. Christine's decision to leave Kody, and by extension, the religious structure of polygamy, didn't just come with emotional consequences. It came with costs, both visible and invisible, that would ripple through every corner of her life. The moment she said no more wasn't just a declaration of personal truth, it was a challenge to an entire system. In her world, Leaving wasn't just walking away from a man. It was walking away from a destiny that had been carved out for her since childhood. It was stepping out of line, defying teachings, breaking a sacred covenant. For a woman raised in the Apostolic United Brethren, that was nothing short of spiritual treason, apostasy, betrayal. When Christine left, she knew it wouldn't be easy. But what she couldn't fully anticipate was the cold silence from those who once called her family. There were cousins, church members, even close relatives who began to distance themselves. Some refused to speak to her at all. Others offered rehearsed pity or outright condemnation. It was as if overnight she had become an outsider, and yet that exile brought unexpected clarity. The more she was pushed out, the more she saw how little room there had ever been for her within that structure. Her value for so long had depended on her compliance. Once she stopped complying, she became disposable. The same people who once praised her for her devotion now labeled her a threat. What makes Christine's departure so powerful is not just that she left, but how she did it. She didn't slink away in silence. She raised her voice. She spoke. Out, she wrote a book. And in doing so, she shattered the narrative that women like her are supposed to disappear. She also took steps that most women in her position never dared to consider legal steps. In the world of fundamentalist polygamy, disputes are handled in the family or through church elders. But Christine took Kody to court for child support and custody. She dared to involve the very system she had been taught to fear. This was more than a legal battle. It was symbolic. A woman who had once believed that earthly justice was irrelevant because heavenly justice was all that mattered was now using the law to protect her rights and her daughter's future. The courage it took to do that can't be overstated. Most women who leave polygamy do so quietly, hoping not to provoke backlash. But Christine embraced the storm. And in doing so, she sent a message not just to Kody, but to every woman still trapped in that system. You are allowed to want more. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to leave. Christine's journey is messy, painful, and far from over. But with every truth she speaks, she chips away at a structure that depends on silence. And for the first time in her life, she's no longer fine. Rewriting her story didn't happen overnight. It wasn't as though Christine woke up one day and decided she was done being part of a system that erased her. It took years of quiet reflection, emotional exhaustion, and finally a rising refusal to disappear quietly. If the early chapters of her life were written by others, this chapter, this powerful, transformative chapter, would be written by her, for her. Christine began rediscovering who she was outside of her roles as wife and sister wife. That meant exploring interests and passions that had once seemed frivolous or forbidden. It meant allowing herself to enjoy solitude, to embrace independence, and to do things not because they served a collective goal, but because they served her. One of her most visible steps in reclaiming her story was starting to speak publicly, not just in interviews, but in her own voice. Through social media, she began to share more openly about her journey, not just the polished parts, but the hard truths. She didn't sugarcoat the pain. She didn't try to make it pretty, and in that raw honesty, she found power. She began to realize that vulnerability was not weakness, it was strength. For years, she had kept everything bottled up, afraid to burden others or seem ungrateful. But now, she understood that transparency could be healing, not just for her, but for others who were watching her from the sidelines, wondering if they too could escape lives that no longer fit. She connected more with her children as her authentic self. She no longer needed to model perfection. Instead, she modeled truth. She let them see her struggles, her growth, her mistakes. And in doing so, she gave them a gift far more valuable than any lesson in religious obedience. She gave them a lesson in courage. Christine also redefined what it meant to be a woman of faith. Just because she left the structure didn't mean she abandoned spirituality. On the contrary, her faith deepened. It became more personal, less performative. She learned to pray not for endurance, but for discernment. She didn't ask how to keep surviving, she asked how to start living. The writing of her memoir was both cathartic and terrifying. Every word was a confrontation. Every chapter was a challenge to centuries of indoctrination. She wrestled with guilt, with fear, with the haunting question, what if I'm wrong? But then, as she reread her own pages, she felt something unfamiliar. Peace. This wasn't bitterness. This was clarity. Christine's story began in submission, but it didn't end there. Her narrative, once shaped by the expectations of others, is now sculpted by her own hands. With her book, she is putting a period on a sentence that has long been written by someone else. And more importantly, she is giving permission silent and spoken to every woman still stuck in systems that diminish them. It's never too late to rewrite your story. Kody Brown's decision to step into the spotlight with her truth was never just about sharing her side of the story. It was a public declaration of her autonomy. For years, Kody lived under the scrutiny of the cameras and the subtle but relentless judgment of a religious culture that demanded compliance. But now she's telling her story without filters, without permissions, and without apology. Part of the power in Kody's memoir is her willingness to explore what leaving meant, not just logistically, but emotionally and spiritually. Leaving wasn't a single act, but a journey. First came the questions, then the doubts, then the emotional tug-of-war between loyalty and freedom, and finally, the undeniable urge to live authentically. In the memoir and in public interviews, Kody reveals the internal conflict she faced. How do you walk away from something that has shaped every part of you? From a faith that gave you purpose, a marriage that gave you identity, and a community that promised eternity? The answer wasn't simple, but Kody didn't need simplicity, she needed truth. That truth meant acknowledging pain hers and others. It meant accepting that she had once played a role in a system that hurt people, even if unknowingly. It meant realizing that silence, while easier, was no longer acceptable. And with that came the courage to speak up, not just for herself, but for the countless other women still caught in the same web. She uses her platform now not just to talk about her past, but to challenge the structures that kept her silent. Her voice has become a tool for empowerment, not bitterness, not revenge, but empowerment. When Kody sued Kody for child support and custody, it wasn't just about the legalities. It was a symbolic act of woman in a historically patriarchal system demanding justice. That act alone set her apart from the others, marking her as someone who would no longer be controlled by fear. And as she faces the backlash from former believers, family members, and church associates, Kody stands tall. She's no longer the woman who says, it's fine. She's the woman who says, this is wrong, this hurt me, and I won't be quiet about it. Through it all, her connection with her children has become stronger. By being honest, by modeling vulnerability and resilience, she's giving them a roadmap for living freely. And maybe more importantly, she's breaking a cycle. Her daughters won't be taught to whisper their pain. They'll be taught to name it, confront it, and rise above it. The public might have seen Kody as the sweet, agreeable sister wife for over a decade, but that was only a fraction of her. The real Kody, the one who dared to walk away, who dared to question, who dares now to inspire, is finally here, out in the open, whole, seen, and for every person still trapped in systems of silence and suppression, Kody Brown's story is a beacon. You are not alone, you are not crazy, and it is never too late to choose yourself.